Student Dr. Antonio Patterson, 51-year-old man, begins third year of medical school. Dude, kudos. I know at my medical school, in my class, there were, I think, 3 students. It was a class of 125. 3 people were in their mid to late 30s when they started medical school. And us being early 20-year-olds at the time, I think I was 21, we were like, whoa, that's wild, I can't even imagine that. And this guy started in his late 40s to now be a third year medical student. So kudos, man. I think we'll get more into it, but just want to start off by saying kudos.
What's up, good people? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Antonio Patterson, and I am now a 51-year-old third year medical school student. And so I just want to kind of talk to you guys about my first 2 years of medical school and give you a little update on what's going on so far in year 3. Guys, I am so elated to be back in school starting year 3. Like I said, I'll put some videos at the end. 10 years ago, I never thought I would be where I am now. I thought I would be there eventually, but not where I am right now. And as you can see, we got our third year white coats. I'm going to put that in the frame for you.
Nice, man. Congrats.
Physician.
Looks like he's at New York Institute of Technology, College of Osteopathic Medicine.
And so what we're doing right now, I'll talk about third year first. So what we're doing right now is basically a pre-rotation 1-month class where we're doing a lot of paperwork, of course, for our different rotation sites, and then we're brushing up on some skills that we're going to need as we go on a rotation. So we're doing things like EKG, we're doing ultrasound, suturing, casting. We're probably going to do intubation, IV, doing some of those things that we'll hopefully get a chance to do in our rotation. So that's what this is about. Actually, tomorrow we have live models, so we'll be doing some physical exams on some of our SPs.
SP standing for standardized patients, and really helpful resource obviously in medical school, because you need to practice not only the actual interview process, taking a history, but also doing your physical exam. And you're going to have a physical exam of everything from just your regular cardiovascular to even like your sensitive stuff, your genitourinary exam as well, all with standardized patients before you do it on real patients in the real world.
At the end of this 1-month class that we're doing, we do a COMAT, which is like a shelf exam for our OMM. DO students have to do that for OMM, and then we'll log our OMM hours.
OMM is Osteopathic Manipulative Medicine, also known as OMT, Osteopathic Manipulative Treatment, and it's DO specific. But one thing to note is that the overwhelming majority of DO students don't actually continue on, in surveys that you'll see that most of them don't continue on to use OMM or OMT in their practice as attendings.
So now I want to talk about what has been the experience as a non-traditional, much older medical school student. For you guys who are following me, you know that I started this journey at 49. If you guys are hopping on here for the first time, I just turned 51 on the 4th of July. Braces. On the 4th of July, I turned 51. Today is July 7th. And I'm a 51-year-old third year medical school student. And so the journey has been daunting to say the least, but it's also been very exciting. So let's kind of walk through it. I'm going to try to walk through it as quickly as I can so this video won't be too long. I will timestamp the things I'm talking about. I have my notes here, so let's do it. So
I'm so impressed, man, because I'm 33 now. And even at 33, I can't imagine going through this whole process again, because my level of grind and hustle and resilience and pushing myself in my 20s is nothing compared to what I have in my 30s. And granted, we probably had very different experiences. He's probably going to dive into how he approached medical school and the whole journey. But for me, it was like, I gotta be pushing myself 10/10ths at redline nonstop. And even if you're not doing that, I mean, sure, it's more manageable, but it's still a very tough process. I'm probably gonna get some flack for saying this, but it's very important to be open and honest with pre-meds. He chose a DO program, and DO programs are a lot easier to get into the MD programs. Doesn't mean DO doctors aren't as good as MDs, but that is probably part of it, right? Because to get into a DO, you need, it's like a 512 for MD schools and like a 50 503, 504, something like that for DO programs. So it's like 88th percentile versus like 60th percentile. It's a huge difference. GPA is also lower for DO schools. So that's one factor. And DO students tend to go into primary care, which generally is going to be less competitive. So even if you don't feel the need to be the top of your class in med school, going through med school is still really tough. So I don't want to water that down, but I also want to have the real honest conversation and say, hey, let's have our eyes wide open, because let's say he was going into like ENT, right, from an MD school, because it's a lot harder to get in from a DO school. And that would be even more mind bending to be like, how do you have that level of hustle and grind? But again, even if he is going primary care and is at a DO program, I do think that Antonio deserves some mad props, because to do that in your 50s, I can't even imagine how tough that must be.
But at the same time, very excited and elated to have gotten accepted at the age that I was, and to have this awesome opportunity to do something that I always wanted to do pretty much all of my life. And first year, I would say it wasn't difficult as far as the curriculum, but it was difficult as far as the transition. So, transitioning out of ministry and being a school teacher, coming into the medical field was kind of difficult because of not so much the content, but the volume of information. And I think any medical school student will tell you that.
They say it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's actually not the most challenging content in terms of understanding it or difficulty of the concepts. Physics, a lot of math, way more challenging in that perspective. But here med school is just a lot of volume of content, a lot of stuff you need to memorize or understand. Drinking from a fire hydrant.
So when I say the volume, I also mean the time. So in the beginning, it was 14 to 20 hour days. So I'm talking about watching the videos, doing the questions, preparing for labs, doing the pre-lab, post-lab. It's just so involved. So it's not that you go in a classroom or you watch videos and you learn. We also have our SPs that we do clinicals on. We also had anatomy lab, which we did do a cadaver dissection. We also have our OMM lab, which we do as DO students, and just a variety of other things. And so trying to be efficient, schedule everything, be at everything on time, make sure that you're doing all your reading before and then all of your follow-up afterwards, meeting with groups, meeting with study groups, meeting with practice groups, meeting with your lab groups. It was a lot. So when I say 14 to 20 hours, that's not an exaggeration. That's really what it was. There were some days where I only got 4 hours of sleep in the first year.
So even in the first year, it's going to be challenging, but you should avoid those nights of 4 hours. Those nights of 4 hours are going to be much more common in your third and fourth year when you have rotations and when you're on call, and in the hospital, they just push you much harder than they should. But first and second, your pre-clinicals, before you get to your clinical rotations, you tend to have much more control of your time. And if you are regimented with your time, and it is a transition, right? So at the beginning, you may find yourself procrastinating a little bit and oops, got a test in a day or two and I gotta pull some late nights and get low sleep. That happens to a lot of students, but what you wanna strive for is to not normalize that. You should be sleeping 7+ hours most nights. And for me, it was actually more like 6 to 7+ hours, because I definitely wasn't as good with my time management and I wasn't as strict about my sleep, because I felt like I could survive on fewer hours of sleep. But we know with the research that your cognitive function and performance really drop off if you're not getting enough sleep. So it comes down to time management, and even with your anatomy, even with your studying, even with your whatever exams and having to do your SPs, and you will still do some simulated encounters in your preclinicals. It's not only in your third and fourth year. You should be able to get adequate amounts of sleep. And if you're not, then I would urge you to consider changing both your study strategies, being more active learning than passive learning, because that's more time efficient, and then also working on your time management. And those two things will unlock a lot for you.
For me, fortunately, because I did a master's here at the school that I'm currently attending prior to medical school, I saw maybe about 60% of the first year material out not including the lab stuff and the OMM, just the classroom stuff. I saw about 60% of that.
Very helpful, and a lot of medical schools will offer these programs, especially if you're a non-traditional student. You haven't been doing this kind of rigorous science coursework in a long period of time. Very helpful to transition, and you can either do like a SMP, a special master's program, before you apply to medical school, or some schools will say after you've applied, hey, optional, you guys can come here during the summer and spend 2 months doing like the curriculum light to help you transition into and get used to that. So first day of M1, you're not like a fish out of water and really struggling.
I missed a lot of family stuff. So that was one of the sacrifices, living here in Jonesboro, which is 4.5 hours away from Bentonville, where I'm from, being away from my family. I wouldn't say it took a toll because we were very tight, we were very close. We either Zoomed or FaceTimed or whatever we could do 98% of the time, every night with my wife and my kids. But, you know, I missed my wife's birthday for 2 years in a row. My wife's birthday is on Valentine's Day. And so I missed Valentine's Day and my wife's birthday for the last 2 years. I missed our anniversary.
That's tough.
I missed all of my kids' birthdays for the last 2 years. My son had kind of, you know, that momentous double digits birthday where he turned 10, and I missed that. I missed his first soccer game. I missed his first basketball game. All the things that dads would normally do.
And I think a bigger part of that is the distance that he has, the 5-hour distance between where he's living right now for med school versus where his family is, because some of those older students at my medical school, as an example, there's definitely some sacrifice, but they are able to generally make time for the anniversaries and the special events and the birthdays and things like that when they're living in the same city, when they're living with their family, right? Obviously way harder to do if it's a 5-hour drive one way and then you got to come back. So just keep that in mind, that this level of sacrifice, I would say, is much more common in something like residency, where you don't have the flexibility of schedule. But in your first 2 years of medical school, you should have a lot more flexibility. It's largely, schools are going to be different, but you're largely studying during the day in regular hours. It's usually not even 8 to 5 in the classrooms and such. Some days will be, but for the most part, it's like a half day, and then occasionally you have some full days, but a lot of your time is spent on your own studying. So you can do things outside of that if you carve out the time, and some people are better at that than others. But I think here it's really tough when you're living so far away from your family to make those events.
My maternal grandmother, who helped raise me, passed away in June of 2022. So that was 2 months before medical school started. And I'm an ordained minister, and so I actually eulogized my grandmother before I came to medical school. So she did not get to see me start medical school. My father had a heart attack a few months before I went to medical school. He ended up having open heart surgery, and so he was still recovering and recuperating from his surgery. So my father didn't get to come to my white coat ceremony. And so those are just some things that, you know, consequence of being an older student, especially if you're as old as I am. Okay. By the way, I appreciate you guys. I always get a comment that says 51 where or 50 where, you know. I do have some gray hairs in here. And yes, I appreciate those comments. You guys tell me I look younger than I am.
Yeah, man, he looks great for his age.
I passed first year. You guys know I did have to remediate a semester of OMM, which was the very first semester. It was very difficult to get used to, but I did remediate that in the summer. Passed with the 98. Everything's good there. Passed all of second year OMM. It was just a matter of timing. So I got my timing down, and everything was good with that.
I personally don't know much about OMM and OMT, so when he says timing, not sure what he's referring to, but if someone can leave a comment below to help the rest of us, would appreciate that.
First year, as far as finances, our tuition was like $62,000. I did get a bit of a scholarship that knocked that down a little bit.
62 for tuition is a lot because that's before living expenses. Now, a lot of DO programs are private. They tend to have higher tuition fees than if you were to go to a public MD school. UCSD, when I was there, I mean, back in my day, like a decade ago, I think it was 30 to 35K per year tuition, so about half the price. But I'm sure it's a lot higher now with inflation. Let's see. Wow, yeah, looks like tuition now is 45K roughly, so definitely gone up quite a bit since I was there. And part of the reason it's so much harder for non-traditional students to go to medical school is that when you're older, you have more responsibilities and more people dependent on you to support them. Your partner, your kids, maybe you have aging parents that you need to help out. And when you go to medical school, you don't have an income. You're now paying a lot of money every year for 4 years for the privilege of earning your MD or DO. And then in residency, you're working long hours for about $60K per year right now, which is still very much underpaying for the level of work that is being provided by these residents. And I think it should be closer to what a mid-level makes, an NP or a PA. That's another discussion. But what helps a lot is when you have a partner who can support for the 7 years, right? Or the 4 years of med school plus 3 to however many of residency. And if you had a prior career, if you were very disciplined with your finances and you saved and invested, that can also make the transition a lot easier.
But with tuition and cost of living together, my first year turned out to be $81,000. We'll get in the second year a little bit here, but it was about the same. So I'm in the hole right now, a little bit over 160. Third and fourth year tends to be a little more expensive because you're moving around a lot. So you have the expense of traveling to rotations. Like, even though I'm in a rotation hub, some of my rotations are in different cities close to where I am. So I may have to go here and there.
That is one of the downsides with DO programs. A lot of them are not affiliated with a larger academic hospital, and therefore you don't have your core group of hospitals and rotations right where you live. Now you need to move, now you need to get paired with other places. And then sometimes there's a lot of drama and a lot of issues that happen with that. You're not treated as well as the local students, and then you get poor opportunities or you're treated differently. And you hear these stories, it is a downside of going DO versus MD. And again, like, I'll probably get in trouble for saying anything bad about DO because it's such a hot topic, but this is the reality. And the other thing I want to say is, when it comes to saving money, it's really important in medical school because that is loaned money. And any dollar you save is actually going to compound to being much more than a dollar saved because of compound interest working against you. So I definitely did not like when I had classmates in med school who would say, oh, just a drop in the bucket. What's another $1,000, $2,000 for a laptop? And I'm like looking at them in terror thinking, dude, that's not $2,000. That's the equivalent of $4,000 after the interest that accrues over the next however many years. So there are a handful of ways to save. Living with other people and getting a affordable apartment is gonna help out a lot. I was actually able to keep my living expenses below the budget for UCSC. So UCSC will say, hey, you got $20,000 or $25,000 budget for your living expenses on top of your tuition. And I found that each year I was able to stay below that, but it does take some intentional planning to do so. A lot of that will come down to your food, your transportation, and your housing. And then when it comes to third and fourth year, he's having to travel for third year. Most of you will not. But during your fourth year, when you have interviews, a lot of money can be saved by using credit cards intelligently, getting points. I saved probably $10,000, if not more, just from doing that. Getting your flights and hotels covered. And that's something that we discussed in a previous video.
That's kind of how first year was. Second year, oh my goodness, second year was immensely more difficult. I mean, difficult in the curriculum, difficult in the timing. There's so many different moving parts, so many things that you have to do to get ready to go on rotations. And the classes are just harder. The pharmacology was harder. Everything was harder. Okay, I'll just leave it with that. Everything was hard.
Everyone's going to have different experiences of medical school, and part of that is your relative strengths and weaknesses. Part of that is the way that the curriculum is organized at a given school. I would say that most students find, not all, I actually met a lot of students who found the complete opposite. I found first year, the first couple months to be the hardest because of the adjustment period, and I had to fix my study strategies, which were very suboptimal. And I talk about that on our study strategies playlist on the Med School Insiders channel. But once getting that dialed in, first and second year were a lot more manageable. And I would say second year was now easier because I had adjusted and improved my study strategies. The subject matter is generally more challenging. When it came to preparing for rotations, we didn't have to do much other than these like standardized encounters and physical exams because at a lot of MD schools, you're connected into the associated teaching hospitals. Whereas I think for DO, they had to do a lot more paperwork and preparation. Most people, myself included, find third year to be some of the most challenging stuff because you are transitioning now to a different model. You're primarily in the hospital. You're getting graded still on tests, but also from evaluations. The hours are a lot more unpredictable and challenging, and I really missed having the control of my time in the first 2 years. And then fourth year, that's going to be highly variable depending on your specialty, because you will do sub-internships or away rotations where you go visit another program and try to impress them because you want to match there for residency. And I had buddies in internal medicine who were like, yo, coolest month in New York City I've ever had, super chill, it was a great time. And in plastic surgery, there were days when I was working 19 hours. Actually, there was a week where I worked 19 to 20 hours just about every single day that week. It was really tough. And there's a lot of highs, there's a lot of good stuff that comes with it, but the level of rigor and how hard they push you is beyond what they should, and I think it's pretty toxic, and it's actually kind of damaging and definitely unsafe to be driving home. Anyways, it's a whole nother conversation. But just keep in mind, the experience of what is the easiest versus hardest period in medical school is going to vary by the individual. And I met a lot of people who thought that first year was super easy and there was no transition for them.
Second year was was tougher because my son started he started basketball and soccer first year. So second year he actually got into tournaments and weekends. So my family did not get to come to see me, or they didn't come to Jonesboro one single weekend in my whole second year. Fortunately, I was able to carve out, I think, 4 weekends, not including Christmas and Thanksgiving, but I got to go home 2 times first semester and 2 times second semester, and those were like less than 48 hours. Like I would leave on a Friday, get there late Friday night, spend all day Saturday, and then Sunday morning, not leave around 1 o'clock Sunday, coming back to Jonesboro. So again, just a tremendous amount of time away from my family, and I wouldn't say time lost. You could never really make up time, but it's just not the same. So if you're a older, non-traditional student and you're married and you have a family and you have aging parents, those are some things to take into account, because you will have to deal with those things as you go on your medical journey. And if you have kids too. So all the things that dads would normally do, or moms, depending on your situation, or partners, or whatever your situation is, you just miss out on those things, and I did, and I felt the brunt of it. I was home this weekend, and I'm a short guy. I'm 5'5". My son is 4'11", and he's in going to 5th grade, and so I missed that that little growth spurt, and those types of things. So it is what it is, you guys.
That's really tough, man. He seems to be pretty upbeat and like handling this well, and I think it's super cool that he is sharing this journey, because it is very atypical, right? To go to medical school in your late 40s. Again, kudos.
I don't want to be a downer. I just want to be, transparent and serious about what it is. I don't want to glamorize it or glorify it to make it look like it's,
Thank you.
Glitz and glimmer and gold. There's.
Dude, the whole I really have never liked the fact that many people on social media portray medicine as something it's totally not, and that's why on Med School Insiders and on this channel we have different series. So you want to be day in the life, where we try to explain and cut through the noise and peel back the layers to show students what it actually is like, because I think it's really damaging when you just wear your fresh new scrubs and pressed white coat and you take the selfies or the photos and you're like, yeah, medicine's great, medicine's all awesome, I'm so privileged and I love serving patients and medicine is my life calling, and it's not the reality. And I've spoken with so many people, whether people I've mentored myself or friends, and at different stages in training, whether they're med students to residents to attendings, and almost everyone will say the same thing, that it is not what they expect. And some things are better than they thought, a lot of things are worse than what they thought, and it's such a breath of fresh air to have someone being real, not trying to glamorize it, just saying, hey, this is the good, this is the bad, this is what I don't like, this is what surprised me, yada, yada, yada. We
had to do like a verbal report at the end of that to present the case. I was never really good at that. And the thing is, I'm not a nervous person. I'm not nervous about speaking. I was a pastor and, a preacher. I taught to congregations and crowds, and I was a speaker for 25 years. But it's when you get to the end of that case and you have to present your findings and your physical exam and, what your diagnosis was and how you're going to treat it, and, how you advise the patient, is just a lot. And we have 5 minutes to do that.
It's gonna cause you so much stress the first time you do a group OSCE, observed simulated clinical encounter is, I don't know, something like that. What's nerve-wracking is that you have other people watching you, other classmates and a faculty member watching you, recording you real time while you're working with a standardized patient. And I remember my first one, it was 2 weeks into our first year. You know nothing. And you're really bad at it and you're super self-conscious, or at least I was, super nervous. And then you fast forward to the end of fourth year and you have to do an OSCE. It's no longer called a group OSCE, now it's your actual graded OSCE to make sure you can graduate and you demonstrate the clinical skills necessary to be a physician. And then you're like, this used to be challenging. This was hard for me because you've done so many reps between your first year and your fourth year. What used to be challenging and intimidating is now easy and almost a joke. You don't have to study for it at all. You're just like, yeah, I did this every day during third and fourth year. There are also some really cool technologies in the work that help with this whole process of dealing with patients, getting better at patient encounters, and I'm actually involved with one of those projects, but more about that in the future.
Over the Christmas break, I went home and I sat down for hours. And my wife can tell you, it was the first thing I did in the mornings. I found this little typing program, and at 50 years old, I taught myself how to type. So when I came back the second semester, I was ready for them, knocking those soap notes out like nothing.
Dude, people sleep on typing speed all the time. I am so grateful that my mom, this is like before typing apps, right? My mom made me sit down with this book that had like a stand in the book cover. It would be like a triangle here, and you would look at it and you type A, S, 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 D, 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 F, and it would teach you touch typing. And I'm so glad she did that because nowadays, I need to do a speed test, but it's generally like 140-ish words per minute. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower, depending on the test I'm doing. And that has saved me so much time over the years because compound that, right? It's not just typing this one soap note, it's everything I've ever typed, whether it's on my phone. I'm not as fast on my phone, obviously, with my thumbs, but maybe I'm typing 60, 70, 80 words per minute on my phone and double the speed on the computer. And now whether I'm taking notes, writing emails, in medical school, typing stuff, it just saves you so much time. Casper, right? The Casper test has a typed component, and they don't actually punish you for having a slower typing speed, but it makes everything so much easier. So our Casper course has this Casper AI tool, and part of it is this typing tool that will use Casper vocabulary, and you'll be timed and you'll have your words per minute up there, and it'll help you build speed. But it is such an underrated skill set. It's not just for typing soap notes, as Antonio's talking about here. It helps with everything in the modern age. So if you don't know how to touch type, if you aren't typing more than 80 words per minute, I don't know, it's like maybe 60 to 80 words per minute minimum on a computer, then put in some time and effort to increase your speed because everything else is gonna get easier and faster. And those little bits of time, they add up fast, man. And in the course of a week, you're gonna save, I don't know, an hour, 2, maybe more.
Do something differently and learn and have a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. So I learned to type at 50 years old during my second year.
Yeah, dude.
Parts of the physical exam, we would get some radiology reports, maybe EKGs, and we got to interpret that as a group. That was probably my favorite class of medical school, hands down. I like the hands-on things, but second year was hard, but I got through it. Even though I had to remediate, I got through it. So that is kind of it in a nutshell. I don't want to make this video too long. I'm at 17 minutes already.
I think that if I was 50 years old versus 21, starting medical school at that age, I would be at a disadvantage when it came to how sharp my mind is, learning new things, as knowing how hard I can push myself. I would be compromised there. But there are a lot of things that I would be way better at. I would probably be a lot better at initially taking patient histories because I have more maturity. I have hopefully better social skills, more empathy, just like being alive longer. Even if my clinical knowledge isn't as quick to come because maybe I'm not as quick to learn new things, I would like to think that the life experience, the other careers that I would have had before, the other experiences, the other things that I've worked on, maybe public speaking or whatever, would add so much value, and medical school would be a different experience. I remember I struggled with public speaking so much in high school, in college, and early medical school. And it was only towards the maybe second half or maybe towards the end of medical school that I really focused on building that skill because, again, a lot of these things that we think we're good or bad at are skills that we can improve on if we are being deliberate, and that I grew to enjoy it. And I'd like to think that if I went to med school in my 50s, I would have gotten past that hump earlier in my life. And all the presentations and all the public speaking would have been so much easier, and I wouldn't be stressing about it as much. So it's kind of an interesting thought exercise to consider what would be easier, what would be harder. I do think for the most part, it is a lot harder to go to medical school when you're later on in life, but I don't want anyone to be discouraged. It is totally possible. You have examples like Antonio here. I know at my med school too, there were a handful of people who, by the time we were in our clinicals, they were in their 40s. And they had families and prior careers and so much more life experience. So don't compare yourself to other people. Focus on your own path. Focus on what feels right to you. And if you do that, I think things will work out. Kudos to Antonio. My friends, let me know what you think with a comment down below.